We have another conversation coming up right now between Lee Newman and Suzi McBride. I'm really looking forward to this segment, which is really special to me because these are two very special people. So let's start. Suzi McBride. Suzi McBride is the Chief Operating Officer at Iridium Communications, the only satellite communications company that offers truly global voice and data coverage. We are very honored to have her with us today. Lee Newman. What can I say about Lee Newman? Lee Newman is the body and soul of the College of Human Science and Technology. He is an expert in positive psychology. I mean, this is a guy that is never depressed. He's an expert in emotional intelligence. What can I say? He is the soul of that school. And I don't know what we would do without him. So now it's my pleasure to introduce both of these, one good friend of mine and another a colleague from industry. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Suzi and Lee. Lee, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paris. Always a great pleasure to see you. And of course, a hearty thank you to Suzi for giving us this opportunity to be with her today. And of course, thanks to all of you in the audience for tuning in for this part of the South Summit. So let's dive in. Suzi, help us understand from your perspective, what are the big current trends in digital connectivity and global communications? Can you give us an idea of what you see happening?
Yeah, I think we're in a period right now where everybody is moving to devices, right? Everyone has personal communications. They want to have access to information instantly, have their data feeds. So there's certainly a big move to having access to information and data, especially when you go to coffee shops, whether you're on your train, you're driving in your car connectivity. And I think Internet of Things is a big future. And how do you keep that connectivity for everybody instantly all the time, especially at Iridium. And with COVID today, we're really seeing a big change of people moving to the outdoors more, being off grid. Of course, with Iridium, you're never off grid. You're always in constant communications, which is really, good for us and fortunate that we can provide that opportunity now with COVID and needing to move outside.
And so those are some of the trends that you see. Let's maybe move to challenges. I mean, I think that tough challenges in industry, identifying those, the challenges that an industry faces offers clues sometimes to where entrepreneurs might look to actually enter and where investors might find interesting opportunities. So what are some of the top challenges you see either Iridium and or the industry facing? I mean, what, said differently, what's keeping execs up at night in this industry?
Fortunately for Iridium, we're in a really good place. Both with our niche market, which is very specific to certain kind of applications. Also with COVID, we've kind of been prepared and planned, and we're very fortunate in that regard. I think it depends on which part of the industry, especially in communications. To me, I think there's three big segments. First is the infrastructure side, providing that communication, which Iridium is part of, putting the pipes together so people can have access to those data. The other one's around the applications or the product layers, and there's a lot of players in that space. And the third, which a lot of people have talked about, is all of the pieces that go around a product or a solution. And so depending on which one you're in, I think it can change depending on what angle you're looking at. So, I think right now there's a lot facing on how to keep connectivity, especially in today's world of COVID. Businesses, I think, are evaluating and changing how they're going to operate going forward. And I think there's a lot of potential opportunity there and challenges around how do companies stay connected, how do they keep their employees engaged, school going on. So right now, especially, I think it's very relevant in the communication industry on how all three of those pieces align and how companies, all kinds of companies, evolve and look at what the future looks like for the new normal we're all kind of facing today.
Yeah, I think, so you mentioned some trends like, IoT and outdoor, move to outdoors, for example, and then you mentioned some of the current things going on, challenges, these three different areas. So that's sort of the present in some sense, maybe with an eye towards the future. Let's jump directly into the future if we can. I mean, as you said, sort of data is this critical part of our lives as citizens and managers. We need data to survive, to thrive. Where does this go? I mean, thinking forward, thinking really big out into the future, what are some of your ideas, or what's your vision for what that future might look like from the perspective of data, connectivity, and communication?
I think it's going to continue to grow. I think it's, the way I grew up is so different than watching my teenagers, right? They're really growing up with this world of constant communication. Even how they're using their devices is different in that, my generation's more phones, and even we moved into text, right? I see them and they are constantly doing video calls. And of course, we're all now doing video calls and video chat as we're doing today. But I really see in the future, we're going to continue to grow this access and this need for data. So the infrastructure layers like Iridium have to be there with the capacity. So it's really important that we have the capacity to support those new niche markets, and the big broadband systems also have to be there to grow. That's kind of more the infrastructure. I think in terms of the big ones, I'm not sure what the next big hot thing is going to be. I mean, who would have predicted TikTok would have taken off like it has? If you look at Iridium's history, we started being a phone provider, right? That was really the purpose in the 90s of building out the original Iridium constellation in satellite communications. Who would have thought that in the 90s, we would have predicted that here in 2020, we are a big Internet of Things company, right? We connect data from transportation of cargo ships to Garmin devices, inReach people going on backpacking trips, right, to delivering vaccines in the middle of Africa. So you would never have predicted that would have come out of a businessman's global telecommunications system. So I can't really predict what that next big thing will be, but it's coming. And I think the important thing is that we continue to have the connectivity to provide those entrepreneurs and those ideas to thrive and bring that next layer of whatever the next big hot application or product is.
Okay, thank you. A lot of our audience, obviously today, are startups or investors, and I think they're quite interested in sort of your thoughts on, where the disruption might happen. I mean, you mentioned, the future is hard to predict. Of course, we'd all love to know exactly what's going to happen, but if you had to place some bets now on some areas where this small company can play in this larger connected world, Industry 4.0, et cetera. I mean, any particularly good ones where you would place your bets?
I would probably, infrastructure side is very capital intensive. So those are very challenging. There's a couple of big companies trying to enter some of those markets, but there's been a lot of historical failures over the years. So that's not, I think that's an important part, but for a small startup, it's a very challenging environment to get into. From the application and product side, I think there is opportunity there. There's a lot, happening today to think about, especially with this new normal we're going to be facing. What are those applications and services that might be needed? But the one advice I'd probably say is a lot of people are thinking about, how do I do Zoom calls to homes and how do I make that more efficient? Because that's very present and everyone knows about those kind of ideas. I would recommend people think about what goes around those ideas. For example, if you had your TikToks, your Instagrams, obviously those are huge and they blew up. But the parts that people don't think about is the light rings that go. Now people need to have light rings to be able to do good video calls or power supplies. I mean, I would think more around not just the present, what everyone's thinking about, but what goes around that you could then jump into to support that infrastructure around the communications. Hopefully that makes sense. But I think there's more markets that people think that you have to kind of be a little creative. And I also would recommend that if you have ideas and applications, if they're not quite working, go outside your original business case and thoughts, and are there other areas that might benefit that you didn't think about originally? We were talking about VR with my colleagues a little while ago, and virtual reality. It really didn't blow up like people thought. People thought we'd all be wearing them and communicating that way, but they are using it a lot, like in the medical fields, in some training instances, where I think whoever invented the original VRs wasn't thinking surgeries, right? But this is a way to take a technology and think about it in a different way.
So I think maybe if I could summarize that, I mean, so you have the infrastructure, which is of course what Iridium and other players in the industry are doing. And then you have all these services in some sense that are in products as well that are enabled by that infrastructure. And I think your advice in some ways is think hard about the kind of what goes around those services. You know, what kind of other products, what kind of other what are the users' needs going to be who use those services, or the providers of those services, and maybe put your bets, put some chips on those spots.
Exactly.
Okay, so I think we have time for one more question, and I wanted to kind of just quickly move away from business and at least put a little toe in the water of social impact. I think digital divide is a term that we all hear. It's been on our radar as a major global issue. So, you know, those who aren't connected in different parts of the world are even more left out now, especially in the world of COVID. You know, when schooling is online, medicine is moving online. If we're not online, we're in trouble. So just to close, I mean, what are your thoughts on how your company or industry in general might help shrink this growing digital divide?
Yeah, and that's a great question. It's clearly at the top of a lot of people's minds today. It's even in the urban areas, you know, you're really seeing a difference in the level of access to technology or internet. You know, for Iridium, we immediately saw some of the needs, and we do a lot with like the crews that are on big ships that are traversing. And it's really important that they continue to deliver, you know, needed supplies and equipment across the globe to different areas, especially during a pandemic. So we did, you know, we did free crew calling to allow those critical essential workers to continue constant communications back to their families during this period. And I think it's important to ensure that we're there to support that. You know, we're very kind of niche, so we don't have quite like the urban helping the schools get access to information. But with this pandemic, we're also really ensured that we can get vaccines to locations. And so for us, the communications is the key in keeping people connected. I think as a whole, the industry really does need to look at how do we help supply more of the demand at rates and making that reasonable for the schools and the different individuals of different income levels to have access, because it's really important. When I was with OneWeb, you know, that was one of the big initiatives we had, was if you could give access in the education systems to information, you could bring up the levels of knowledge. And telemedicine is going to be very important in the next coming years. So I hope as an industry, we step up and we help to provide more of those opportunities as a whole.
Great. So so from Iridium's perspective, it's really about you know, supply, logistics, and enabling many of these kind of naturally global services that are critical to dealing with crises and other things that affect.
Absolutely. I mean, that's our mission, right? Is to make sure we provide that connectivity. We have 400 plus value-added partners that develop, like the entrepreneurs out there. You know, they're developing the real solution sets and those ideas of how to solve some of these really interesting and hard problems. And we want to make sure we're there to help create that environment and create that connectivity, especially when you're out of reach and not in normal terrestrial, you know, hotspots, Wi-Fi's or cellular, that you have the opportunity to have that same service or connectivity for these solutions.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much. And we're out of time, but I'd like to thank you, Suzi, of course, for taking this time to be with us. Everyone in the audience as well for tuning in here at South Summit. And of course, Suzi, we want to wish you the best as Iridium goes forward into the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee. Appreciate it.